putting women on these pedestals to destroy them. Things were really vicious.
Actress Sophia Bush rose to fame as the breakout star of One Tree Hill.
He should be so lucky. I am Brooke Davis.
She built a platform as a fierce activist and launched her mega-hit podcast, Work in Progress. But behind the fame, she was carrying more than the world ever knew.
You had the courage to speak out and to take on Hollywood.
The public part was so awful.
Now, alongside her best friend Nia Batts, Sophia opens up about the pain, the shame, and the power of finally choosing herself.
I didn't know how to deal with the shame and the kind of embarrassment that I'd been wrong, and that I'd been wrong really publicly.
But that was very hard for me as her best friend to watch. That was very hard.
She's the person who's known me for half my life and could say, "Don't you dare forget who you are." Those women helped me take off 40 years of expectation and people-pleasing.
Join hosts Martin Luther King III, Arndrea Waters King, Marc Kielburger, and Craig Kielburger for an unforgettable conversation about owning your truth and the lessons she learned along the way.
I want to speak up, but what I don't want is...
Welcome to My Legacy. For our new listeners and viewers, this isn't your typical solo celebrity interview. This is the show where extraordinary people pull back the curtain and bring along the one person who's seen their full story unfold, the highs, the heartbreaks, and the unforgettable life lessons. Today, we're joined by someone who's never been afraid to speak up, show up, and shake things up. Actress, activist, investor, and podcast host, Sophia Bush. Sophia, we're honored that you joined us today, and would you do us the honor to introduce your plus one, your ride or die, the person who you wanted to bring on this intimate conversation with you today?
Yes. My goodness. My ride or die, my we ride at dawn, best friend and collaborator and work wife and most trusted confidant. My guest, my favorite person who's here with me today is the one that I call whenever anything enormous is happening in the world, whenever anything, perhaps ridiculously small or exciting or insane is happening in the four walls of my own home. We really go micro to macro. She is truly the most brilliant person that I know, someone who will be the first one to take you to the best music festival you've ever been to, but also is the most brilliant analyst, thinker. She can look at a system and figure out how to make it better. She can walk in a room and bring an unmatched vibe. She is absolutely not just the most intellectual person I know, but I think also the most exceptional person that I know, who has taught me so much about how to live a deep and full life, and who I tell people all the time I'm the most blessed in this lifetime to call my best friend. And as if she could ever do more than all of the amazing things that she does as an entrepreneur and an investor and an activist and a thought leader, she also gave birth to my tiny best friend. Getting emotional. She gave birth to the most wonderful little boy. His name is August, who I am immensely grateful and lucky to call my godson. And yeah, there's no way I would be in this stage of this journey of life had I not been walking this path next to her for the last 20 years. We are joined today by the incomparable, the amazing Nia Batts.
What a beautiful introduction.
That deserves a round of applause. There's like an award for the best introduction of a...
We're 3 minutes in and we're already crying.
It's going to be a good episode.
I love you.
Yeah.
I love you too.
But I do want to turn for a moment because you all met each other in your 20s. I've met some of my best and deepest and most wonderful relationships with my best friends also as adults. And so, Sophia, I know that you said that when you met Nia in your early 20s, it was one of the first friendships that felt truly expansive and grounding. What made Nia stand out, and what did you need in a friend at that time in your life? What could you receive?
You carry the most powerful presence with you in a room. And I think I was so sort of knocked over by this woman who is both so self-assured and also has the kind of confidence that doesn't require her to show off her intellect or her taste or her deep knowledge, again, on the global markets or like the best music that's come out of the most niche space that year. You know, for better or worse, I can never not sit in a meeting and take notes. And as we were all leaving this session with these, incredible climate leaders and folks, she just looked at me in the aisle, making our way out of the auditorium and said, "What is the girl from TV doing here, taking notes like a court reporter?" And I was like, "Well, I actually went to journalism school. My notes are very good if you need a copy." I was just trying so hard to like figure out why this funny, amazing woman was so cool. She was like, "Yeah, I want a copy." And we've been best friends ever since. And I think it is that. I think I'd be remiss not to say, we were in the era of the early to mid 2000s where in the world of my day job, the media was just, putting women on these pedestals to destroy them. Things were really vicious. The kind of criticism of women, the fat shaming of women, the puritanical shaming of women, like it was hard to be out there as a young woman in media. And then I met this woman who was this young executive, to brag, the youngest ever female and youngest ever Black woman executive at Viacom at the time. And she was like not about any of that. Wanted to talk, all things play and all things work. And I was so amazed by her and her confidence. And I think as our friendship grew, by osmosis, I was like, oh, if Nia sees me this way, I can see me this way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Nia, it's your turn. Yeah. So at that conference, when you all met, what did you see in Sophia that made you say, okay, this is someone that I want to have in my life?
Yeah, well, as Soph was mentioning, I was working in entertainment at the time. I kind of grew up a little adjacent to it. My uncle Lewis, who's one of our business partners, has been president at Black Entertainment Television for like what's probably 38 years now. And so the business of entertainment and the business of making stars is something that I was very familiar with. And maybe to some extent like a little cautious of. And I think what surprised me so much, when I met Sophia, is truly how genuinely curious of a person she is. And it's so refreshing when you meet people like that. And then also when they're in a place, in a space where you're not necessarily expecting them to be. I mean, we started, engaging in these like cause related spaces very early in our careers. And that was very, much before it was, as in vogue as it is now for, I think, every person with some sort of public facing, bit of visibility to be connected to an issue or a cause. But Soph was passionately curious about everything, the environment and how we're interacting with it, the rights that women have or don't have. And from the very, very like early days, really conscious of her space in the world as a white woman, and also what that meant with the privilege of the platform that she knew that she had. She took it very, very seriously from the moment that I met her. And that was a demonstrative difference than, a lot of the other sort of young actresses, certainly that I came in contact with on the shows that we had on our networks or that I worked with in some capacity. Also, what she's leaving out is she raises her hand to talk. She's excited. She has thoughts. Like the way that her brain works and processes information happens in real time and in such a joyful way that you can see her becoming more excited by what she's hearing because she's building on it and has ideas. And that kind of energy is really contagious. You don't find a lot of people that, yeah, I'm going to cry now. Everybody's going to cry on this show. You just don't meet a lot of people that so genuinely will then leave the room and want to figure out how it is they can get involved and what it is they can do. And so I asked for a copy of her notes, and we really have been best friends since then. And, I was a very young executive, and that also is lonely. I also think Sophia and I were both only children in our sort of like first version of our nuclear families. My family evolved in many beautiful ways, but she left California when she was very young and moved to North Carolina and worked on a show and didn't really grow up in that culture of young Hollywood. And, to some extent, like on the show, but just in like the broader ecosystem, and I worked in 1515 Broadway, and most of, my peers and people I worked with were much older. And so we found these shared spaces where we could come together and we could work on issues, and we could also, have fun because North Carolina and, being in Wilmington was not that far, from New York. And so we had opportunities to see each other and also travel together. And a lot of our formative years and experiences were spent bouncing ideas off of one another and making, mistakes and learning from them and growing.
As the mother of an only child, that also, it warms my heart and soul to hear that you are both only children and that, like you also have made this family together early on.
Yeah.
I think sometimes as parents of only children, we kind of worry, but so it really is wonderful as the mother of an only child also to know that you all have found your forever family in each other.
Yeah, and I think that you make a family as well, and we have done that with the people around us, and even my nuclear family evolved. Our nuclear families have been built and shifted in different ways, and I think when you have a really good center and there's like love and strength and humility in that space, you have longevity as well.
Yeah, as I was listening to you do that beautiful tribute, I was struck by how you spoke of how you both met through activism. You gave this beautiful tribute about Sophia's commitment to activism. And it's one of the parts, Sophia, I think a lot of our listeners and viewers admire about you because, of course, people know you as the breakout star from One Tree Hill. But what a lot of people also know and I think admire was the fact that although it was a hit behind the scenes, you had the courage, along with 17 others who spoke out against the toxic culture. And you had the courage to speak out and to take on Hollywood in that way. When you look at your own activism and specifically that experience, what did that teach you about courage, about speaking up, about, frankly, the true price sometimes you have to pay for holding true to your beliefs, just as it could not have been easy at that time?
Yeah. So many things pop into my head, and to your point, it certainly wasn't easy. I think you realize, and it's not that it's unique, unfortunately, but when you begin sharing stories with people around you, which I think I knew how to do when it was time for those stories to be shared in community, because we had done it in so many other places. We had worked on the front lines with folks trying to ring the alarm bell about climate. We had worked on human rights issues, water access issues around the world, And so I think when it was time, in an odd way, to turn that energy inward and then to my immediate circle of coworkers, when Me Too became, I won't say became, it had been happening and growing, thanks to Tarana Burke and her activism and her beginning, the rallying cry in the first place. But when the pot boiled over, as you will, in 2017, it was really interesting because it was the reason I had left my most recent job at the time, because we'd hit a point where it was, well, either you have to continue to shrink yourself and you should be so grateful to have the job in the first place, or you're going to say this is unacceptable and to prove that point, leave the room. And again, I will say that I think I knew how to do that because of my friendship with Nia and the group of women around us. I had finally been taught to trust myself enough to say, even for me, not just for the world, but even for me, if one door closes, another will open, or I'll open another one. I can actually close this door and send that signal. It was the spring of 2017 that I closed that door, and then the summer of 2017 that this global door, got kicked down. And what was so interesting to me about it was I'd had a singular experience on my recent job, but on my first and longest, 9 seasons of One Tree Hill, all of us women had had the whole spectrum of this experience. And there was so much fear and also relief in our community and in our community at large about finally people don't have to keep secrets, and finally people don't have to pay compliments to people who don't deserve them, and finally what's it going to look like. And the fear came from so many people on our show, certainly, and I would imagine in the ecosystem, saying, I want to speak up, but what I don't want is to have to tell the world exactly what happened to me. And it was the decade plus of Nia and I's friendship, our larger ecosystem of women, and all these people we had built these activist circles with, and that we'd done all of this community organizing and civic engagement work with, where I said, I got all the girls together and said, guys, I think I know the way we do this. If we do it together, we can explain from this issue to all the way to this extreme issue. We have been through this. And it was the most amazing thing, because I got to bring, small, often local basement organizing work to this large, very public entertainment world. And me and my friends from this show got to protect each other. And people got to know this happened to someone, and this happened to someone, and this happened to someone, but they couldn't assign it to whom. And in a way, it let us talk about the system, because sexism and sexual violence and sexual harassment is systemic. Racism and oppression and redlining and financial inequity, those are systemic issues. And in our own way, I feel like we got to stand up for ourselves and call out a system instead of have to re-traumatize ourselves specifically. And I was really proud of us. And I was so proud of everyone who had the conversation, and particularly proud of how women in entertainment said, we can garner the spotlight, and who will we turn it on to? So how do we support the women in the NWSL and their fight for equality? How do we support women in academia and signal boost their stories of what they've been subjected to in higher education? How do we support women in the medical field, from nurses to surgeons who go through this too, but don't get millions of eyeballs on their personal Instagram pages? And so it was very inspiring to me the way that whole movement kept recentering community rather than any one person's story. And I think it was something that felt familiar and right to me because of the decade of work around the world I had done next to this woman.
So that prepared you in a way, like all of that work that you all did together, when the time came and it was your moment to use your voice in your field, all of that preparation, it seems like it came full circle.
Wow.
Nia, you are extremely gifted. You work across media, strategy, finance, and you're bringing those expertise to your investment work with Sophia. What's a project that you're most proud of your collective partnership, and why has economic empowerment become such a driving force of your passion and your work?
It's interesting. I was speaking at a conference yesterday, and we were talking about failures. And I think that for me, probably for us, these are learning opportunities and experiences. It's hard to classify them kind of as like a failure. But to me, I still think that one of the most rewarding things that we did was with our business partner, Katie Cockrell, when we were, in Detroit, building out one of our first brick and mortar businesses, which was a salon and store called Detroit Blows. And it was kind of an inclusive take on like a dry bar sort of esque model that was really thinking about not only how do we make a space where women, people of all ethnicities and hair types can have consistent service? Can that service be non-toxic? Can we make it feel beautiful? And can it be generative in a way that a portion of those profits get funneled into our affiliated nonprofit and make micro grants to women entrepreneurs and grants to organizations that help women either enter or re-enter the workforce? Can you take something that seems like seemingly like superficial and make it feel holistic and whole and nurturing in a way that people are not expecting. And so it became our little Trojan horse for a conversation about identity politics, for a conversation about representation and beauty, for a conversation about community development, who gets to be investors and who gets to be invested in. And unfortunately, during COVID, we made the decision to sunset that business. And I think, it's one of the things I'm most proud of that we've done together because again, it was one of those things we just didn't have to do, but we just didn't know who else was going to do it. And so the three of us did it. And when we first, started to play around with this idea, and then Katie and I were here in the market, my mom helped, she was so instrumental with that business, helping with our business plan and operations and getting us open. And I said to Soph, like, is this crazy? Do you think that we should do this and that we should do it in Detroit? She's like, we absolutely have to, and I'm going to be the first to check in and we're just going to build it. And we did. And to just will something into existence that has the physicality of a space, um, it was a humbling experience, but a beautiful experience. But it really was, when we decided to close the business, it was catalytic for us in terms of what we had to do next. So we went on to work with the first women's bank in Chicago, which is the first commercially chartered bank in the country that focuses on reducing the gender lending gap for women-owned businesses, because we know that those businesses receive 16% of commercial loans, like relative to, to male that are run by men.
And Black women receive even less than that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we were in Detroit keynoting the Forbes Under 30 conference the year before we actually closed the salon. And we were supposed to be on stage really talking about this business that we built in Detroit and how we're getting ready to prepare for the next, fundraising round where we're going to expand into other markets. But again, back to the data and these stories we just couldn't put down, we started to dive in and realize that, yeah, yes, women-owned businesses receive, a much smaller share than, than other businesses. But when I tried to ask what the funding levels were that year for Black-owned businesses, they told me that they were going to start reporting that data in the next survey, but it was statistically insignificant, so it wasn't reported in the current data that we were seeing. I was like, statistically insignificant.
Wow.
Yeah. And what
And
year
so
was this?
this must have been
This was
20,
2019.
yeah, 20, oh yeah, 20, yeah, 2019. So yeah,
Because
so
we keynoted the conference planning to start our raise, and then when the pandemic began, that's what led to us having to sunset the business. And so it was a real whiplash and statistically insignificant. I remember watching Nia's face, like we heard that and I went, oh, I immediately looked at her and thought, isn't it surreal that we own a business in this majority Black city founded by three women, two of whom are women of color, and the women of color in the room were just told they are statistically insignificant. And then we were like, get the matches, we're lighting it on fire.
Yes.
And I think even also that women general partners, at venture capital firms, that they were only, representative of 10% of, that investment leadership in firms across the country. I think right now it might be closer to 13. It vacillates between 10 and 13%, but we thought is okay, this feels like a fixable problem. It's probably we stands to reason we might have more investment in women-owned businesses, certainly, women of color I would expect as well, if we had more women investors and also investors that were women of color. And so what was interesting, and it's a very sort of long-winded response to the initial question, but that project really became a catalyst for, our involvement with the bank and, and debt strategies and ways that we can support and capitalize businesses. And it really brought us back home to what we had always been doing, which was making these angel investments. But it led to us formalizing our venture capital strategy, and kind of bringing it into this main firm that my dad had been running and that my uncle is a part of as well. And so now we have this family business that is,
Yeah.
based in Detroit and Atlanta, that in very, is very deeply connected to this business that we had in Detroit, this brick and mortar, business that we weren't expecting or really set out to build, and that had some success, but as it had to transition and evolve into something different, it very much, had all of the markers of what would come next. And so that's the beautiful thing about, about the journey.
Statistically insignificant. And then when you think about like all of the black owned businesses and in particular the black owned female businesses. My sisters have a bakery here in Atlanta that they've owned for over 10 years.
Okay, can we do a shameless plug? What's the bakery's name?
It's CEG Bakery, and it is
CEG Bakery.
I'm like, wait, do they ship? What do they have?
they do ship, and they really are fantastic.
Yes.
I'm biased,
Amen.
but they
Yes.
really
Martin,
are.
what's your favorite thing that they bake?
Maybe they're cupcakes.
The cupcakes.
Yeah.
Okay, so order the
Everything is-
cupcakes.
Everything
What's it
is
called?
fresh. CEG, it's Keg Bakery, Confisiere Eclectic Gourmet. It's the whole idea of bringing together Southern and French and just like the best
Oh, wow.
fresh ingredients. So if you order strawberry cupcakes from there, like they're going to have fresh strawberries, cut up in there. And our daughter works there sometimes after school, and she loves the lemon bars. I mean, everything is really great. And they've done this, without any type of financial backing, because when you go and you go to a bank, and black women trying to get business loans is almost impossible. And then when you really understand, though, the creativeness then that goes into building a business without that, we actually are probably better bets.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the fact that we are so creative. We have to think outside of the box when it comes to marketing and all of the different pieces. It boggles my mind because of that strength and intelligence and creativeness that we actually are a better statistical bet when it comes to businesses. So you're helping lead the first Black majority women-led venture capital firm in Michigan. And what do you think are some of the biggest barriers still holding women back, and how can we overcome them?
I really think it's access to capital. We know that, in Michigan, especially, it can take founders 24 to 48 months longer to raise that first $500,000. And we know that the numbers, that the time is longer for women, for people of color. And so the biggest barrier in many respects is how quickly people can get their ideas funded. And for us, that's why it was so important for us to be early stage investors. I mean, we started as angels, but we still in our strategy invest pre-seed to Series A. And we do a lot in the pre-seed and seed stage because we know that if we can make an investment in a founder and we can work with them on a milestone, on a goal that feels achievable, even with a small amount of money, we have seen, like, in our portfolio, where small amounts of money at the right time and mentorship, support, resources, like the belief that we have in our founders has led them to go on to raise millions of dollars and run very successful businesses. And sometimes you just need people to really see you and your vision and to support you with capital, but also with some of the platform resources that we wrap around our founders as well. But it does require a deep-seated belief that people of color, women, underrepresented founders from underrepresented communities have a better chance at solving problems for those communities. It does require the belief that the diversity of perspective can create an innovation that others might be missing. And so for us, we believe that there's a tremendous amount of value that can be captured, in these markets and with these founders.
It's one of those things where I think it's actually a way to tear down this false binary that you either do well in the world or you do good. This idea that there's folks who care about people and planet, and then there's folks who care about profit. And I think one of our favorite things to talk about, and we learned this from our activism and our community organizing, is there are actually many places where the math and the morals meet. We know that companies with diversity of leadership across race and gender and background have better outcomes fiscally in their quarterly and annual returns. So the idea that, the truth rather, that more ideas in the room means that you will create a better product or outcome for your company is exciting. And for us, when we think about some of the folks who might have a harder time fundraising, we want to go to those folks. Some of the geographies that have a harder time fundraising, we want to be there because it really reminds us something that was core to our activism that we realized was core to our fiscal strategy is that old Archbishop Tutu adage, you're going to pull people out of the river for so long before you're going to walk upstream and figure out who's pushing them in. The financial inequity that harms so many communities also harms the GDP of America. So if more people are doing better and making more money, the whole country's doing better. It's not actually a you versus me and us versus them thing. It's a let's build a bigger, more successful and sustainable economy. And we understand that by nature of being upstream, we can support more people. And that feels exciting to us because the more of us there are in the rooms and the more companies that might have been overlooked that we can actually invest in, the more investors in the future won't overlook those folks. And so it's where the math and the morals really meet.
If this conversation is resonating, we'd love for you to subscribe to the show and maybe share it with someone who needs to feel a little less alone today.
Sophia, what's one thing you and Nia do together that is absolutely nothing to do with your business, but really fills your souls?
I mean, I come back to music. You know, we used to joke in our 20s that we could be like at a concert dancing on top of the speakers on a Saturday night and running a board meeting on a Monday morning. That is still true. I think then I was like, what's going to happen when we're in our 40s? And now I'm like, we're in our 40s, we got kids, and we're still so fun. And I love that for us. You know, it's impossible for us not to be deep and nerdy about every single thing. And, you know, now instead of just sending news articles, we're literally trading white papers for biotech companies. I mean, we are deeply, as you said earlier, Nia, we're deeply curious people and we take our careers very seriously, but we remember to have fun. And, you know, it might not be Friday and Saturday night anymore. We're busy, but like we're still having a good time. And I love that I know I can say like, oh my God, did you know this concert's happening in Chicago in 2 weeks? Should we go? And she's always like, yeah, what night? We say yes before we even know when. And I love that we haven't lost that.
That's great.
Well, let me tell you, even when you get into your 50s, you still won't. There is still fun to be had. And yeah, when you get a group of moms together and good friends, you know, and, you know, particularly like you get everything done during the day, but it is a lot of fun to be had when we all get together. Sophia, now I want to turn to a deeply personal essay that you wrote in Glamour last April about your coming out journey. And I want to read something that you wrote because I thought that it was just so very powerful. So I want to quote your exact words, which is, I finally feel like I can breathe. I don't think I can explain how profound that is. I feel like I was wearing a weighted vest for who knows how long. I hadn't realized how heavy it was until I finally just put it down. That kind of clarity doesn't usually come without heartbreak. So what was the turning point for you?
If I may, you know, it's interesting how bite-sized the world wants to make your life or your experiences when you are a public person. And I understand why. The totality of a life, someone's journey it's not clickbait material. And so you won't expect this, but the reason this really relates back to Nia and our friendship is because there was so much public fascination about, well, what is she? How does she identify? Explain. And they wanted to make it about this coming out, and part of me and part of Nia were like, has nobody been paying attention to like anything I've ever said since I've been on TV, or all the people I've kissed since I've been on TV? Like, what are we doing? So there was humor in it, certainly. There was absolutely, given again this rising fear-mongering, there was a real importance I understood for saying the words and saying them in a way where they could be both hopefully inspiring or freeing to someone else, but also to say all of us deserve to take up space and deserve to have a full spectrum of rights. But the thing that people didn't see behind the scenes was the journey to get there. And the vest wasn't just about identity. The vest was about society. The vest was about the expectation on women, the exhausting demand to be small but not so small, to no matter what you do, you have a career, how dare you not have kids? You have kids, how dare you not have a career? You wait to consider getting married, you're a crone, you got married young, you must have been dumb and you didn't know what you were doing. It's just, we can't quite get it right. And what I had to come to terms with was that I'd carried certain traumas rather than push them back on the people who'd given them to me. I'd tried to make everybody happy. I'd lost my individual way, maybe in a way, because I'd prioritized community so much that I finally said, well, I guess it's time. And I guess it's time I do the thing everybody tells me to do. And I'll make the list and check the boxes. And everybody says, once you've done it, you'll be happy. And I checked all the boxes and I really wasn't happy. And I didn't know how to say that to anyone but Nia. And I didn't know how to say when people said, well, why did you get married and why did you do this? I didn't know I would go through the next step, the family building stuff, by myself. I didn't know until it happened to me. And I didn't know how to say that. I didn't know how to deal with the shame and the kind of embarrassment that I'd been wrong, and that I'd been wrong really publicly. And I called my best friend, and she, if I may, I'm just making sure I'm allowed to say the thing, but she said, me too. And we both knew what was going on, obviously, with each other. We talk 100 times a day, but when I said, I think I have to be done, and in her own life and in her own world with her own young son, she said, I do too. I would never wish for someone else to be heartbroken. But to have my best friend in the world having her version of the same experience, and both of us saying we gotta put it down and we gotta try to make a new way. In the most profound way, I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew I wasn't doing something rash. I knew I'd literally exhausted every option. I'd gone to every therapy. I'd done every bit of the homework. And I had to just say, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to learn something, and based on that learning, make a new decision for your future. And so everybody wanted to make it about, the next person in my life, because the next person in my life was a woman. Plenty of people were shocked it wasn't Nia, by the way. I was like, she is my wife, just not like that. But, what people didn't understand was that the journey started, again, in a community of women. And there were two of us. And then there was a best friend from college. And then there was a woman I would eventually fall in love with. And then there was another friend, dealing with, will I stay or will I go because of addiction in her family with her husband. And the community of women who who didn't go, really bad timing, you just had this whole big thing. They didn't lean out and critique, they leaned in and said, it's okay. Those women helped me take off 40 years of expectation and people pleasing and just trying to do it right because it hadn't felt right ever, no matter how hard I tried. And it was, yes, about stepping into that portion of my identity in a way, but what it really was in totality was a homecoming and a learning to honor myself. And I learned how to honor myself watching the strongest woman that I know and a group of the most impressive women we love honor themselves. I had the courage of that conviction because of what I was being shown in both love and example by the women in my life.
Nia, as I'm listening to Sophia speak, and it's so clear the deep connection that you have as this friendship that's so deep, what was the hardest part for you, Nia, watching Sophia go through this incredibly challenging journey to reach her truth?
Not catching it soon enough. And I think that when hearing the stories about, whether it's, the her one of her shows when she was in Chicago, or the show when she was in North Carolina, and this theme that because we're so strong, we just hold so much, and it really does eventually bubble to the surface. And the hardest part for me was feeling like I wish that I had been there, because I also was going through something and maybe didn't have as much sort of emotional space as I normally do. There's always been this beautiful kind of give and take. And I think we were both going through something similar, feeling, something similar. And it's hard when you realize that what someone's saying to you is also forcing you to confront something in yourself. And while we were able to be there and support one another, I think it was just a lot of sadness that we're two women that often, you know, again, have to carry so much. And being strong is not the prize always. Sometimes it's being open and honest and soft and allowing yourself to fall apart to rebuild in different ways. And I think that's the most beautiful thing that has come from this. But you always want to protect the people that you love, and you never want to see them suffer. And, Sophia lives in the public eye, and I've never really had to contend with the type of public pressure in perception and people's thoughts and feelings about what you're doing and seeing how that affects someone. And so I know that was so hard for her, but that was very hard for me as her best friend to watch. That was very hard. I wish I could have taken that part away.
Wow.
I love you.
I love you both.
You know what I will say is we were together on that journey. The public part was so awful and so largely mistaken. I got to continually come back as I was being essentially recategorized as a person. That's at least what it felt like. Maybe that's the algorithm and the way they poison us all, but it felt like I was being sort of remolded in other people's opinions or judgments. And I got to continually come back and sit with my best friend who would remind me in the greater scheme of what we were all going through and the ways we were all supporting each other and the resources we were all sharing. She's the person who's known me for half my life and could say, don't you dare forget who you are. Don't you dare forget what is true. And I don't think I would have made it through that part. And despite moments where I wanted to be enraged or correct a bunch of things with a whole bunch of receipts or whatever, she was the person who always reminded me that is not for you. That whole fray is a lower vibration than the person that you are. Stay who you are, stay where you are. And when someone loves you enough to protect you and restore you and also demand that you be the person they know you to be, when you're pushed to a limit, like that's real love. That is the kind of person you want with you in the trenches. That is the kind of person you want with you in any emergency scenario. That is the kind of person you want to shut down the dance floor at 5 a.m. at the rave with you. Like that is your person. And we are all of those versions of ourselves together. And it is the gift.
I think we all deeply loved listening to the two of you. And what a beautiful reflection that truth isn't only something you speak, but it's something you live. That being authentic isn't easy, that it requires blowing things up, that it requires having tough conversations, requires calling things out, and it requires a friend to stand side by side during those hardest times. And I love the fact that today, how your friendships evolved, you are now creating space to empower others, the math and the morals, through economic empowerment and social good. And seeing your friendship, I'm actually reflecting on the four of our friendships and the journey that we started together, now creating impact. And so I just so deeply grateful to the two of you and for the tears that you shared for each other in the tribute. So thank you for sharing your legacy with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
This is going to go down in the podcast Hall of Fame for just great conversations and lifting up best friends.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. New episodes drop every Wednesday with bonus content every Thursday. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss a moment.